Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Never Stop Dreaming podcast today. I really want to thank my co-host today, Barry Axius. Phenomenal guy, does a lot for the community. And so some of the things that I want to talk with him about or just converse with him today is it's going to vary. Some of the things that we'll be discussing is kind of not necessarily a how to, but for maybe some of the people that are just becoming aware of community activism. I would like for you to, if you want to share your story a little bit about how you got in, that's perfectly fine. But just share for people that may want to get into that realm,
Yeah.
and what it takes, you know and yeah, so just give us a rundown how you guys started, what it takes, and I'll just kind of go through and ask various different questions as we
It's
go
all
along.
good. I appreciate you, King. Good looking out for having me on the show. Barry Axius, founder of Voice of the Youth. Um, you know, Entrepreneur, mentor, father, community activist. Started Voice of the Youth in 2008. I was coming from a lifestyle full of, hype, drugs, you know what I mean, street life, women, all of those things that unfortunately sometimes a young black male tries to follow behind. And I felt like creating an organization that was focused on supporting young people, specializing in African American young men and women that would help them through the pitfalls of life. And I felt like even though I had a father that was very active in my life, the interest and the intrigue of the underworld, the street life, the fantasizing about that kind of allure, especially when you have a lot of young black males that I was running with that were, out of place, not in sync, not
Mhm.
having a father in their household, having mothers that were working various different jobs. So the streets that were centered around me, the streets that my father tried to make sure that me and my brother never ran to, I ran to it. So
Mhm.
a lot of the reason why I created Voice of Youth in 2008 was I was going through a transition where I was changing um, a lifestyle, and I would consider all the things that I was doing on the streets a lifestyle choice. It wasn't one certain thing I was addicted to. I wasn't just addicted to the money. I was just addicted to the cars, girls, or the esteem of being that dude or one of those guys, or um, some uh, threat to, what I'm saying, our community. It was just a simple fact that I looked at, had I had real leadership, guidance, mentorship, as I like to say, if I had a real model, not a role models play roles, real models, they stand with flaws and show the imperfections. I think
Uh,
that if I had a few more people in my ear outside of my father that was like, yo, Barry, don't do it, man. Go this way. I felt like that things could have changed. But, with that all being said, I don't regret um, a majority of the things that happened because I felt that it was necessary for me to have this kind of story, for me to be able to have, you know, this kind of information,
yeah.
being able to guide folks into the pitfalls of life and explain it to them why you don't want to go this way, giving them opportunities to may go the other way, and give them a sound understanding that in these choices that you make, regardless of if you feel at the particular time it's the best choice, there are going to be some kind of consequence. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So be
So
very, very aware. If
right.
there's, you're making a choice, right, with sound mind, and you think at that particular time this is the best choice for you,
Mhm.
understand eventually some of those choices will have some consequences. And a lot of those consequences you can't redo,
Right.
right? Those consequences are nothing that you can pick and say, I choose that one. The consequences choose you. You don't choose the consequences. So
I totally agree
I
with that.
created that Voice for the Youth component for the simple fact, again, though I had my father and he was a heavy influence, I still was more influenced on the outside of my community, and that really trapped me. And now I'm grown. I have a daughter. Actually, I have two daughters. One, that I adopted,
Mhm.
and I have flourishing businesses. Hidden Gems Thrift Store, a nonprofit called Voice of Youth, Seriously Delicious Eats, Black Blueprints, and a host of other collaborations, Black Friday Coalition, and other things that I'm doing in the community. And I've risen to prominence in my community activism. In creating the mentorship, it actually created activism in a sense of doing and speaking for those who have not been heard or who don't have a voice or who can't speak loud enough. That's what the Voice of the Youth was all about. Voice of the Youth was speaking for those unheard and making sure folks know that the youth have a voice and have an opinion. So in a sense of speaking upon a lot of the things that plague our young people, it also continued to speak on things that plagued our Black community, social injustice, police brutality, and so many other things. And so I kind of got my activism start by really speaking on issues that affected our young people firsthand. And then, of course, a culmination of police brutality and a lot of the different cases that happened here in Sacramento kind of elevated me, as well as allowed me to open up space to talk about certain things that were very, very real, that weren't being talked about here in Sacramento. When we talk about the lack of equity in Sacramento for Black people, the simple fact that we are continued to be fed lies, untruths in Black people, and that we came into this activism to make a change to the overall system.
Okay. So my next question is, so you mentioned that you know, maybe a few more active members per se, like other than your father. My question is, who do you think could have pulled you to the side and you said, you know what, I may go that route that that person is talking about. Like any specifics, like a uncle, or like, you know, just a pastor, like who per se, like is there like a particular person, or are you just you know?
A drug dealer that I was a drug dealer that I was getting my drugs from.
Okay.
Right, literally, mind you. And a lot of people don't know this, but when I write my book, you will, right? One of the worst influences, but at that particular time was one of my best influences, because I felt that a person that was leading me astray was actually helping build me up, was a guy that I called Daddy O.
Okay.
And Daddy O was one of my best friends at that particular time's father. And my father was cool with him enough to where every time I said I'm going to my boy's house, he knew the father, so he was like, all right, cool, go.
Okay.
He really advanced me in the drug trade. I got put on the drug game by one of my men's.
Yeah.
My father, when I first got my first package, got that, and it was just marijuana, family. So just bear with me. It's now legal. It's called cannabis now. What happened was my father found the stash and like came home. I'm high as hell from basketball practice. Just got done eating. He at least allowed me to eat. He was in my room. Mind you, it's like 12 at night. And I'm thinking like, yo, what's going on? And I just remember him being in a robe. He starts talking all these subliminals. I'm thinking in my head, like, what's this guy talking about? He was just hella disappointed. He pulled out of his pocket my stash, because I was game goofy. I came home, stashed it, because I got my man's put me on, and he took care of it. I was on probation at this particular time, so shouts out to my dad for never calling my probation officer. But he flushed down a whole bunch of product that I still ain't forgiven him for. He owes me money on that. But anyway, I was going then to my best friend's crib, because I was kind of like where I could only really go. And to come to find out, like, his father was an undercover drug dealer. And when we were picking him up, my best friend at the particular time, that was at boarding school, one day I'm high as hell, coming to his crib drunk, because we're picking up my man's, and he was looking at me, and I'm like, dude, he's about to call my father. I'm done. We got in the car. I'm halfway passed out. And this is when I was living in the Bay Area, Marin County at this particular time. He lit up a huge stogie at that. We weren't smoking blunts. We were joint rollers, things of that nature.
Yeah.
And I just remember looking, and he passed that joint. And then that's when I discovered the family secret. And unfortunately, that family secret kept me tied and connected to a life of drug dealing. that lasted a few decades,
Okay.
and in particular. So I think that the people that I was centered around, a person that you felt that should have, you know, it's like this. As I got older, I didn't care, but I was 16 at that particular time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And exposing me that early to that, this is where an adult should have protected me. Like, you could do what you do, right? But yeah, we want to go drink. Yeah, we want to go smoke. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that sometimes you still have to have a protective mechanism to these young people, even though you may be on their foul. You know exactly what happens when young people at a young age start dibbling and dabbling into drugs
Yeah,
or alcohol. You know what I mean? So as an adult, I really believe that he set me up, as well as particular people that were already hustling that never sat there and said, hey, B, do this. They were just helping chain the supply. Like I told you, it was one of my men that put me on, was
yeah,
like, yo, here's a package. You know what I'm saying? So I really believe that the influences that we have surrounding us, right,
yeah.
culminate a lot of what we become. So it's not only that I'm watching, I'm listening to the hip hop music that
Mm-hmm.
is speaking to me as a young black male in my experience. But then I'm now being around people that can, oh, wait, you got the hookup? All
Right.
right. Instead of saying, nah, we're not doing that. And nowadays, you don't have an outlet of individuals speaking against some of these atrocities that are happening in our community. It's almost kind of like we're celebrating that. I would have wished that somebody outside my father, outside my probation officer, um, that was really saying, you have a lot more talent than doing this. Because doing what I did, it took all the way up to 2008, right? Mind you, I'm getting put on in the 90s. It
Mm-hmm.
took me till 2008 to really just kind of like say enough is enough and go to this life, as some folks would know what it's called, the square life, and really, really never look back and always look forward and continue to make sure that I set a good example for the young people that I not only mentor, but the young people that are watching my every move.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, so I'm gonna flip the script for a second here. I want to. Okay. So before we get into, I guess you could say, full activism, who are some of the activists that you maybe in the past looked up to, and maybe currently that are still, continue to fight the good fight, as some would say?
Top of the chain, I think that their blueprint
I'm sorry,
definitely.
you was on mute for a second, so
Oh, okay. The Black Panthers, I believe that they are at the top of the food chain. Of course, the great brother Malcolm X. We're actually doing a Malcolm X festival honoring him May 22nd. Me and my business partner Dana Maisha. Uh, I don't necessarily really look at certain activists now. Um, there are, like, my brother Tef Pole. There
mhm,
are a lot of folks that are fighting a good fight, but I think that the art of activism, you know what I mean, has been lost in the equation of celebrity. So I
okay,
think it's more watered down right now. I think it's so trendy that,
more
you,
Hollywoodish kind of.
it's Hollywoodish. You got folks really, and this, like I said, this is no disrespect on Colin Kaepernick, because I was just talking about Colin Kaepernick and Jay-Z, because, Tim Tebow got signed. And I just
Right.
made, I do a lot of stuff on Facebook. For folks who watch my Facebook, know I'm always saying something that has more truth than you can handle and pisses people off or puts
Mhm.
me in Facebook jail. But I was, giving an example of like what Jay-Z was allegedly doing when he signed up with the NFL for this team up for change and time for change, whatever thing. And or inspire change, whatever they were doing. And
Uh-huh.
I laughed and I was like, well, Tim Tebow just got a job from his former college coach. And Tim Tebow hasn't like played NFL. And last time he played NFL, he was a quarterback in 2012,
Mm.
approximately like 3,000 days ago.
Right.
Um, and, his head coach from college picked him up to say, you can be my tight end.
Mm.
And Colin Kaepernick is sitting on the sideline, blackballed. And I know Jay-Z he wasn't there to say, hey, I'm here to get Colin Kaepernick in the league. But
Right.
my thing is, if you're going to influence the masses, I would hope that some of your influential conversations you have with some of these, slave owners, which is the NFL owners, would
Mhm.
change the mind of at least allowing this young man to get opportunity, right? Because some white guy off the street who is in street clothes playing baseball just is about to get a check and about to live his dreams, who's already been in the NFL. And a high level player that went to the Super Bowl is sitting at home. He's activist in his activism, and we know why he got blackballed because of his activism. But it's like we got to be very mindful on how we navigate um, in the principles of these white confinements. I say that to say this, that when Colin Kaepernick was ordained the new activist, one, he never asked for it.
Mm.
Two, they hyped him up so much and they forgot about the people that gave him the ability to do what he did. And that's people like myself and so many others across the nation
Mhm.
that have navigated in their activism from 2012 even beyond, but in the current state, 2012 and more. I'm just talking about the current activism that really started sprouting out more or less when you saw the Trayvon Martin situation, more or less, of course, when you saw Mike Brown in 2014, where activism just didn't be just confined in what we saw historically, but it was also now defined in what we see currently.
Okay.
So, it's almost like if it's not coming from a celebrity, it's not valid, right? Or if it's not coming from an OG like a Sharpton, it's not valid. And I think that's far from the truth. And what happened to me that was like ineffective when you spring and you have this movement like Black Lives Matter,
Mhm.
and you just think that everybody is under the umbrella of Black Lives Matter. I'm under the umbrella of Voice of the Youth,
Mhm.
but I had a significant, output when it comes down to speaking on Black lives. Though I was
Mhm.
Black Power, I was working under the guise, if you want to talk about an era we call the Black Lives Matter era, right?
Mhm.
I was working under that guise, but even though I wasn't a Black Lives Matter organization or part of their chapter. So you hear only Black Lives Matter and you forget about all the other organizations that was doing work under this Black Lives Matter activism era, which I think that was able to make folks center themselves and attack one corner of us when there
Mhm.
was multi facet organizations and individuals really putting in work.
Okay. So my next question. Okay. So how can we change not necessarily the face of activism, but how can we make it more effective in today's world?
That's tough, man. Because once they start writing checks instead of COINTELPRO, and folks start, and again, I am not one of those individuals that was out there marching and trying to be out in the streets all day and all night and telling people that, I ain't getting paid, I ain't getting paid. I always advocated that we need to get money.
Mhm.
The revolution needs to be funded. So I think on the aspect of what we're dealing with right now, you got a lot of clout chasing, a lot of attention seekers, a
Mhm.
lot of individualism. You don't have a collective. And I think that's what makes a lot of this stuff hard because they've already figured out how to separate us. You don't have to do COINTELPRO, which
Mhm.
was a lot more sophisticated. And I do believe there are agents in every um, position, right? Like there's agents here in Sacramento. There's
Mhm.
agents in Minnesota. There's agents in New York, wherever place that activism is truly taking form. But they don't need to do really anything because inside the confines of organizations, we're destroying ourselves. So
Mm.
it makes it hard to really trust what you're signing up for because one person might see it in another way, you might see it this way, and then next thing you know, your differences can't come to some agreement. Your differences become someone putting up a Facebook or some kind of Instagram social media message about you, right? And then it goes value. So they know how strong we are because we're stronger with numbers, but
Mhm.
we don't have the numbers to fit. When you pay attention, what's the difference outside of the pandemic being full scale? What's the difference from last year to this year when you had everybody and their mama ready to come outside? Because we've seen the same killings, right? The difference is
televised, right?
Yeah, not only the difference is the pandemic. They have opened up different stuff, and we are not as organized as we should be as organizations and activists to really fully take an unapologetic stance and do the things that we have seen successful with our ancestors, right? We've seen the Montgomery boycotts, you know what I'm saying? We've seen them police the communities, you know what I'm saying? We've seen these individuals attempt to not only overthrow the government, but get into government policy building and policy changes by becoming candidates and opponents of this oppressive citizen. We've seen all these things take place. This round, it's not happening because we're under siege in this idea that one organization or one individual has the master plan. Well, let's follow them and everything will be centered. And that's far from the truth.
Okay.
Everyone, I feel, if their mindset is truly on making sure this oppressive system is dismantled, if they are not negating from making sure we take responsibility back from our communities, not expecting the people that we want overthrown to just do what they're supposed to do. Like if we want them defunded, that means that we have to start doing community policing and doing other things to invest in our communities, to stand up against violence against Black women, to stand up against violence against children, to stand up against these demonic sounds that are continuing to move in our airwaves and control our kids. There has to be a lot more that goes into just a simple project of police brutality in our moments of activism. That's why activism from now to then is totally different, because they tackled on everything that was particularly pertained to a system, where a lot of it now is we're focusing on one systemic issue and then we're hoping that all of the other ones will fall right behind it, and that's not even far from the case.
Okay. I guess I'll split it up into two questions, but one of my questions. So within like the Black community currently, what are like two of the big, like in a nutshell, what would you say are like the two biggest issues right now?
I would say there's a few, so it's not one or two.
Right,
and
right. But just ones that that kind of pick at you.
I think that there's a low sense of unity, right? A low sense of unity and identifying what are identifying what are the real problems that we're all willing to say, I may not like you, but you are an individual that feels the same way about this. We always have a different opinion. We don't stay on code. So that's like unity and not staying on code, right? So we were all gung-ho, not me, but a lot of folks, Black folks was gung-ho because we, drank the Kool-Aid that white media gave us about Donald Trump. He's a racist. So when you have Democrats now saying, well, Donald Trump's a racist, all things are bad because of Donald. It's like, okay, well, we don't need another 4 years. Nah, get him out of here. Okay, we get him out of here. Do you know that they have not talked about not one Black thing that they were supposed to talk about when they were navigating to get all of our votes from country to state to city, when they really put Black people on the agenda to the point where Black people were arguing that Ice Cube is doing the wrong thing when it comes to agenda, when it comes to planning what our future looks like. It's over 100+ days that Joe Biden has been our president, and VP Harris has been vice president, and you haven't heard too much about Black-centered issues.
No.
We haven't really jumped and dived and talked about what does equity look like, because we've been sold the idea of equality for so long. We just wanted to be equal. Well, here's a news flash, people. How can you be equal with individuals when your melanated skin creates this superiority in a black man and black woman. Like we created all of this. So they ain't no equal nothing. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like we are the daddies and mamas of the people who are oppressing us. So that's the one part. Yeah. People need to clear that out of their way. And secondly, it just becomes an ordeal when you constantly have to redirect black people
Mm-hmm.
and to seeing the obvious mistakes that we continue to make by becoming Democrats or Republican without creating our own party. Our own party then creates a nation that is implemented on political tactics and ideas that fit agendas of the people that created the party. And then our candidates will be speaking for us, not the Democrats that speak for the time being because it's popular and we just need some votes for some Negroes, or the Republicans that just want to battle for the rich and those who are heavily privileged. We keep on playing ourselves thinking that every time we give them a vote, they have a vote for our best interest, and that's far from the truth. So being politically sound as well as financially sound is some of the things that are huge impacts in our community, and some of the things that we constantly have to continue to have real dialogue about, because once you don't have real dialogue about it, everybody's going to think about, like, where did it go, where did it go, where did it go? But It's not going nowhere because we have not addressed it the way we should address it.
Okay. So this is kind of like my second to last question. Will we ever see quote unquote Black Wall Street again? And at this point, does it really matter?
You'll see small facets. You'll see. I mean, I think there's a little bit of a Black Wall Street here in Sacramento. Of course, you got the African marketplace, but the reality of it all is that that's a whole lot of responsibility. And I don't think Black people are ready to be responsible. And I think that hurts Black people when you speak truth to that. And I say that because there's this epidemic that's going on. And this epidemic is the killing of Black women and Black children. Literally, thousands of thousands have been killed. And we're just talking about 2021. We're not even talking about 2020, 2019. And when, again, like I said earlier, when you have this idea of defund the police, which I'm all for, but with the merit of defunding the police, that means if there's no police funding, right? And that's why we're saying take away the funds, reinvest them in the communities. Well, if there's no funding for police, let's say we take so much of their budget that they can't have police patrolling, that means that we have to police our own community. And when I look at the statistics and the staggering numbers of Black women and Black children that have been killed by Black men, that have been killed by Black men, that's letting me know we ain't policing shit. So I'm hard pressed to believe that if all things change for the instance of changing for the benefit of us, to mobilize in a way where we can take responsibility for all things that are banks, all things that are schools, all things that are infrastructures that will create Black wealth, create Black unity, that will create Black communities, right? If we can't do the smallest of things within our household, how in the heck are we going to sit there if they're giving us, hey, you guys do it yourself? If we can't do the small part, how are we going to do the big part? And that thing to me is, I have hope for it, but sustaining it for more than a weekend. I'm talking about Black Wall Street's got to be a Walmart. It got to be like a Walmart where we got that Black Wall Street here in Texas, a Black Wall Street here in Tennessee. We got a Black Wall Street here in Nevada. We have a Black Wall Street all the way in Idaho. Wherever Negro at, you got a Black Wall Street.
Right.
If we can't take care of the smallest things within our household, if we have the inability to make sure that we finesse that, then you have to look at our reality. Our reality is dim, because those who control all those things can continue to keep a people oppressed. And I look at it again when the pandemic happened. How many Black organizations or individuals created curriculum or created schools that eventually, when you start opening up, they can slide right there and get that big building? We constantly talk about the public food system, but you didn't hear enough educational entrepreneurs saying, by the time we get out of this pandemic, or while we're in this pandemic, I'm going to start a virtual online schooling system. You didn't see that.
No.
So you're really waiting for daddy daycare, as I like to call them, to kind of clean up, control everything, and direct you to where you need to be. If we can't direct ourselves, how do we really truly believe we can govern ourselves outside of white supremacy?
Okay. So yeah, so my last question would be, so in conclusion, not only a solution, but how, okay, I kind of want, because voice of the youth, I want to touch back on that. So what are you seeing now that is plaguing our youth versus when you first started? Like what has like just taken full control?
Social media.
Social media.
I mean,
Or positive or negative?
it could be positive and it could be negative, right? Um, they're overly sexed, they're exposed, they're you know, they're overly exposed to violence. There's no shut off, there's no turn off. Cable TV when I was coming up, turn it off. CDs, cassettes, give me your CDs, cassettes. I'll put them in the garage, or I'm gonna put them in a box. You're not gonna get them, right? You know, turn on the radio. Eventually, the radio is gonna play all slow songs or commercials when 12 o'clock hits, right? Our young people are not being exposed at an early age, are continuing to be fixated with certain lifestyles that are being promoted on social media, being marketed to be some kind of way. So not only do you have the influences in your neighborhood, the influences in your household, the influences in your school, but you have all these influences on a social media, you know, app that you can change your lifestyle within 2.5 seconds. And you have a Facebook, you have a Twitter, you have a Snapchat, you have, you know what I'm saying, an Instagram, you know what I mean? You have all these different ones that you can funnel a certain kind of lifestyle. And to me, that's just like almost too much power. It's too much power for adults. So now as we go into it, don't let me forget YouTube, right? Now as we go into it, I can say to a young person, hey, yo, I got an opportunity. And they're going to be like, what kind of opportunity? You know, working over here, you know, moving boxes for like $12 an hour. That's cool, but I think I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. What you talking about? Look at my YouTube, man. You YouTuber. Yeah. Oh, smack, brother. You got 150,000 people that view this video of you just walking and saying, yeah, right? Yeah, man. It just sent me a check. That's my 5th check off that. Get out of here. There's so much more access for revenue, as well as OnlyFans for our girls. Hopefully, just our girls. But you're doing so much stuff off the rip that you didn't have to check in and call in and get permission for. So that becomes a problem because a lot of our techniques and some of our technicians are still operating from the 80s and late 90s. They're not even operating from a lens of see you right where I can grab you. They like operating on a lens of like, well, maybe if we get them some pizza and give them some gift cards, they'll be cool. Like our kids don't necessarily care that much about collaborating or being around their friends in physical settings if they got their phone. A majority of them will be on their phone when they're with their friends in physical settings outside of whatever comfort zone they're in. So I think a lot of what we are challenged by, because drugs are still here, they're getting worse and worse. Violence is still here, it's getting worse. You have a challenge where social media becomes a lot that of the things that entice a lot more of feuds that if we didn't have social media, I would have been like, yo, I want to fight Larry. In 2001, here comes 2004. I'm not still holding a grudge on Larry.
Mm-hmm.
Flip side on that, I want to fight Larry. Now, because I get to see Larry's posts every day, and then people chiming in, I'm gonna want to fight Larry even 3 years after the fact. You know what I'm saying? Because it's still gonna be something that I've been influenced. And these are the kind of things of why the ignorance and why the violence in our community has gone up, is because people are so disrespectful without fillers and filters on social media, that it exposes too much and too many people have access, and then you can necessarily create stuff that's not there by just making up a fake page, but knowing the situation and being a troll to entice or incite more ignorance. So social media is heavy, but at the same point, I can't knock it because it's also built and supported a lot of successful entrepreneurs.
Right. So Gary, man, I mean Barry, thank you for your time, man. I really appreciate it. Before we go, how can people, that are interested in community activism and taking it serious, how can people get in touch with you?
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me here with community activism. Find a cause that you are readily available for and ready to sacrifice in. It doesn't have to be a national call. There are also localized things that need to be put in work. So, just be mindful that you don't have to do the major popular things right now to be an activist. There are so many fights that we have to do every day that creates your activism, as I like to say, activate your activism. So folks can find me on Facebook, Barry Axius, Twitter, Barry Axius, IG, Barry Axius, and of course, follow Voice of the Youth and support Voice of the Youth.
All right. Well, here you have it, folks, on the Never Stop Dreaming podcast, Barry Axius. Thank you, sir.
I appreciate you, my guy.